Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Week 11 Highlight Haven NFL Recap Show. I am your host, Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by Josh Wolver of Josh's Sports Report to break down each and every game that took place during Week 11 of the NFL season. Josh, it's great to have you on.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, we will be taking callers throughout the stream, so feel free to call in using the link in the chat. With that being said, we have a lot of games to break down, so let's jump right into it, starting with Raiders versus Dolphins in Miami. Dolphins 34, Raiders 19. I know in the tailgate show you predicted this to be a pretty big Dolphins win. That ended up being correct, so I'll let you start here.
Yeah, 34-19. This game was never close out of the get-go. Las Vegas drops to 2-8. Miami tries to crawl their way back into things, but they're still 2 games below 500 at 4-6. Tua, a great game, almost 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions for him, and he hit Jonnu Smith 101 yards, 2 touchdowns, which is really surprising. Quarterback wasn't as big of a problem for Las Vegas as it has been in recent weeks. Only the one interception for Gardner Minshew, but they threw it 43 times, which is a bit confusing to me, honestly. Brock Bowers, the rookie tight end, had one of those touchdown grabs. He has been absolutely huge. Where would the Raiders be without him? 126 yards on 13 receptions. He's just been huge. But at the end of the day, Miami's just the better all-around team, and they pick up the win at home.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at this, Tyreek had 7 receptions, 61 receiving yards, and a touchdown. This was his first touchdown since week 1 against Jacksonville.
Wow.
So it's really just been an off
Yeah,
year for him.
he's been terrible on my fantasy team. I drafted him with the second pick or third pick, and he's been horrible.
And then another guy, Devon Achane, has really thrived clearly a lot more with Tua in the starting lineup. Now, the Dolphins are 4-6, so it's not going to be easy to work their way back into potentially the playoff berth. But this team, they have a shot. They've looked really good with Tua so far. Though my only concern is how good the AFC is. And the AFC is going to make it really difficult. If they played in the NFC, I think they'd have a better shot. But playing in the AFC, it's going to be really difficult for them to be able to make the playoffs. But if they keep playing like how they did in this game, 288 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, I definitely do think they have a shot. Raiders are now on a 6-game losing streak as well. Now, moving over to the next game, Browns versus Saints. Saints dominant win, 35-14. Now, Jameis Winston had a really impressive game stat-wise, despite the loss, and I think a lot of this came from, garbage time,
Right.
throwing the ball, all that stuff. They were down by a lot. But he went 30 of 46, 395 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, his main target was Jerry Jeudy, who had 142 receiving yards and a touchdown. Njoku also had 9 receptions for 81 receiving
Mhm.
yards. Even Elijah Moore had over 60 receiving yards and a touchdown. Derek Carr, also a solid game, 21 of 27, 248 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. But the real story of this game, Taysom Hill, my goodness, what a performance he had. 7 carries, 2 receptions, 188 scrimmage yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. And Marquez Valdes-Scantling, obviously, Olave has been dealing with some injuries this year. And Rashid Shaheed is out for the season. He's really stepped up. 2 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. Quite frankly, most of those yards came off one play. But he also played really well last week. I remember that.
Right.
And it might be too late for the Saints to make a playoff push, but they're now 2-0
100%.
under interim head coach Darren Rizzi. And I think this is big in terms of Rizzi is just proving the impact he can make. And I think he's really fighting for that potential full-time head coach role next year. Obviously, there's a few candidates they could go after, Ben Johnson, all those guys, Kevin Stefanski maybe, but he's trying to make sure that he is the head coach next season. And so far, he's doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, you're right. I think Rizzi has made a good case, obviously 2-0. But as of where we stand right now, I don't think Darren Rizzi will be the head coach in New Orleans next year. I mean, he's coming in and playing. It's not his fault. He doesn't pick the schedule, but coincidentally, he plays probably the two worst teams in the league in the Panthers and the Browns. And sure, they pick up some pretty awesome wins and some team boosting wins, but I wouldn't say that's enough right now to persuade New Orleans to staple him as their guy for next year. But Matt, it really just all depends on how it goes. Right now we're in week 11. We still have another 7 weeks, and you're right. That's what's going to decide it. But as for this game specifically, I don't know what they have Taysom Hill listed on as the depth chart. I think it's tight end.
Yeah, I believe so.
But 3 rushing touchdowns on 131 yards on the ground is crazy from Taysom Hill. But he actually threw 2 passes. One of them was intercepted. So I guess maybe keep handing him the ball off. You're right. And when we look at the Brown side, you're right. Jameis Winston's stats a little bit inflated like a balloon, almost 400 yards. But you got to remember, they only scored 2 touchdowns, and it wasn't like Jameis Winston was out there dominating the game. And New Orleans still ended up winning by multiple touchdowns. They scored 5 of their own, 2 touchdown passes from Derek Carr. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, you mentioned it in his 2 weeks with New Orleans, or I actually think this is his 3rd week, but he's made an impact in the past 2 weeks. The long ball has been there for him. He has been burning defenders deep into the secondary. It's only happened 1 or 2 times a game, but when it happens, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is in just explosive player potential kind of guy. New Orleans hangs a 35 spot at home. On the tailgate show, I remember we talked about really this was a defensive-minded battle. Neither defense showed up. I mean, this game combines for 49 points altogether between 2 teams combining for 5 wins beforehand. So this is a bit of a head-scratcher for Cleveland. You have a good game from your quarterback, but it just proves how bad the Browns are. I don't know where you go, but I know where we'll go. And it's Jets Colts. 28-27 was the final score there. I was in attendance. Matt, this was a real head scratcher. Anthony Richardson, after, voluntarily sitting out of games. And of course he comes back to beat the Jets. He has 2 rushing touchdowns. And he also has a touchdown pass to Josh Downs, the Jets. Oh my gosh, Aaron Rodgers, hang it up right now. It's time to pack it up and get on out of here. He said he wants to play next year. We don't want you next year. Out of here, please, out of here. 184 yards. Sure, you can look at it and say 22 of 29 for 2 touchdowns. Did he throw a pass in the air that went over 5 or 7 yards? I don't think so. If the Jets' game plan was to only check the ball down, then congratulations. They absolutely executed to perfection because there was absolutely nothing going downfield. Breece Hall, the 2 touchdowns. He's just the bright spot of the team. You have a great concept to get Kenny Yeboah wide open for the touchdown on his only catch. And I think that was great. I disguised the play really well. Everyone thought it was a run play. You leak out the tight end. He's wide open. That's perfect. This defense is a fragment of what it once was, Matt. We were talking about a defense that was top 3 in the league last year. Where did they go? What happened? This is terrible. You give up 28 points to a Colts offense that really is only good in the running game. Head-scratching loss. Jets fall to 3-8, Matt. This franchise is doomed.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Aaron Rodgers didn't look terrible from a stats perspective. When you actually watch the game, his performance was really, really underwhelming.
Yeah.
But the Jets have lost 7 of their last 8 games. Things have gone downhill. As you mentioned, Breece Hall, really the only bright spot of this team. He had a really, really solid game in this one. 16 carries, 7 receptions, 121 scrimmage yards, and 2 touchdowns. And even Devontae Adams actually had probably his second best game as a Jet, 6 receptions, 72 receiving yards, but it just wasn't enough. And I said this during the tailgate show, people have to start hyping up the Jets. Or, they have to stop hyping up the Jets is what I'm going to say.
You're right, Matt.
You feel like they're going to do something every single week. This week is their week, and it's never their week.
I guilt-tripped myself into picking them on the tailgate show. I thought wishful thinking could help, but nothing can save this team.
Everyone expects a change, and there hasn't been a change yet. I wouldn't expect there to be a change in the future. But, we'll see. I just would stop betting on them because nothing has happened.
Man,
And
here's the thing.
Mhm.
Now that the games don't matter, the Jets will Aaron Rodgers will turn back into his prime. He'll turn right back and he'll win all the games and absolutely ruin a possibility at a high first round pick. I mean, when it comes to losing games that don't matter, the Jets are just about as good as you can get. And when it comes to competing in games that matter, the Jets are about as worse as it can get.
And the Jets are another team that I think uh, obviously need a new head coach in this upcoming
Right.
season. But
Absolutely. Goldberg was horrible.
no one's gonna want to go to the Jets. Here's the thing. Like you could, and I mentioned this name, Ben Johnson, earlier. He's not gonna go to the Jets. Honestly, he's probably gonna go to a
Mm.
better team. Because I'm sure that there's a better team that would need him over the Jets.
Everyone wants him. I mean,
Yeah.
he's when you talk about head
Mhm.
coaches coming out, I mean, he's the first name that people are going to say.
Yeah. But no, just an overall terrible, terrible loss for the
Mhm.
Jets. Next game, Vikings versus Titans in Tennessee. Vikings 23-13 victory. Sam Darnold 20 of 32 passing, 246 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown. Really good game from him. Jefferson pretty solid, 81 receiving yards on 6 receptions. Addison had 61 receiving yards and a touchdown. Will Levis, another game where he had a lot of passing yards, 295, had passing touchdown, also an interception, probably inflated from some late game passing stats, and a Nick Westbrook Akine 98-yard touchdown. That obviously,
Mhm.
now what was that? That was 1/3 of his passing yards basically on one play, which is pretty crazy. Titans just had 33 rushing yards. Now, this doesn't just apply to the Titans. I feel like this was a season worst for the league combined rushing yards. It felt like a lot of teams struggled to run the ball, but the Titans were no exception. They also had 13 penalties for
Yep.
91 yards compared to Minnesota's 3 penalties for 35 yards. Obviously, that team stat played a big factor. Vikings had 13 more first downs than the Titans, and the Vikings advanced to 8-2, still second in the NFC North behind the Lions, which we'll get into later. What were your main thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Matt, Minnesota absolutely just wins a game that they had to, right? I mean, this is one of those we talked about it a couple weeks ago with the Commanders. Uh, this is one of those trap games for Minnesota, and honestly, they didn't impress me as much as I would have liked them to. I mean, coming out with a 10-point win isn't terrible. Running the ball, they were terrible. I mean, Aaron Jones, he carried 15 times, only picked up 39 yards. Cam Akers, not much better, 10 carries for 25 yards. The team averaged only 2.5 yards per carry, which isn't good. And the only rushing touchdown was Sam Darnold using his legs. In the passing game, Vikings looked a lot better. Sam Darnold close to 250 at 246 yards, 2 touchdowns, one to Jordan Addison and one to Cam Akers as a receiving back. Justin Jefferson led the team in receptions and yards, but did not find the end zone this week. You're right. Besides that Tennessee long touchdown that played a crucial role in this game, if you take that off the board, Will Levis finishes with under 200 yards, no touchdowns. So, really not a good game anywhere offensively besides that one play for Tennessee. They kicked a couple of field goals and then team stats. Ridiculous. You're giving up 100 yards of penalties if you're Tennessee and 11 first downs compared to 24. You can never win games that way. I agree. Minnesota won a game that they needed to, not in the prettiest fashion, but they got it done. Win by 10 on the road, improved to 8-2. Who thought we would be sitting here? Remember, before the season started, this was JJ McCarthy's team. He went out before the season started, out for the year. Sam Darnold has really stepped in and done a beautiful job through 11 weeks because they've had their bye. They are 8-2.
And moving over to the next game, we saw this last week. The Chiefs blocked the Broncos
Mhm.
to win the game. We see it again this week. The Packers block the Bears to win the game. Packers 20, Bears 19. Bears had an opportunity to win on a game-winning field goal. And once again, it did get blocked by the Packers special teams. So Packers definitely got a little lucky at the end, but overall,
Mhm.
a pretty solid game for them. Love didn't have to do too much passing. 13 of 17, not the most attempts, but still got 261 passing yards, a passing touchdown, interception, and a rushing touchdown. Really did fill the stat sheet there. And then Josh Jacobs, 134 scrimmage yards and a rushing touchdown. Christian Watson, 150 receiving yards. Overall, a very solid game for this Packers team. And then Caleb Williams, 23 of 31, 231 passing yards, and 70 rushing touchdowns. Didn't throw a touchdown.
70 rushing touchdowns. 70 rushing yards.
Yeah, my bad.
You're good.
Yeah, good catch there. Didn't throw a touchdown at all this game, but it was still one of his better games, I think. He didn't turn the ball over. He had a solid completion percentage, was moving the ball a little better than he has in previous weeks. DeAndre Swift, again, big game, 71 rushing yards and a touchdown. Packers have beaten the Bears 11 straight times, which is hard to fathom.
Wow.
Obviously, a big rivalry, but at least recently it's been a lopsided rivalry, to say the least. When I look at it, I think that the Bears should have won this game leading up to that kick. And it makes sense because they had a chance to win the game, obviously. But just in terms of how they played, I do believe they played better than Green Bay. Instead, they find themselves on a 4-game losing streak, though.
Yeah, man, I said it at the tailgate show. These divisional games are always close. You come in here and think Packers, Bears, there's no chance this is anywhere close. Green Bay by 2 touchdowns at least. And I actually said it was going to be a field goal game, and instead it ends up being a missed field goal game, but a field goal game nonetheless. 20-19 is your final score. The Packers could have played a lot better. Jordan Love with the interception also had a touchdown pass. But when you think about it from the Caleb Williams side of things, I get it. The completion percentage is up. I think he completed 10 or 11 passes against New England, which was just disgusting on the stat sheet. But are we talking about no touchdowns, no passing touchdowns as one of your best games as the number 1 overall pick is a bit of a head scratcher when you're missing out on guys like Drake May and Jaden Daniels. Well, obviously Chicago can't redo the pick, right? So they're going to have to make do with Caleb Williams. I just really haven't seen the progression. I guess this is a step in the right direction, but certainly hasn't fulfilled the expectations that he's going to have to live up to in this league as a former number 1 overall pick. A rookie who was getting it done, Rome Odunze, 65 yards to lead the team alongside DJ Moore with 62. For the Packers, their rushing attack led the way. Josh Jacobs, 76 yards, a touchdown. Jordan Love also scampered in with his legs. Christian Watson, my goodness, 4 receptions, 150 yards. The Packers keep their winning streak against Chicago alive, despite you said it, Chicago playing probably a better game. They had more first downs. They were much better on third downs. They went 9 of 16 on third downs. Packers only had 5 third down opportunities, which is a bit confusing, I think. I mean, they went 1 of 5 on third downs, which Chicago actually went 3 of 3 on fourth downs. And then they also had they had the upper hand in total plays and time of possession big time. And they didn't turn the ball over. So you're right. I think Chicago deserved a win here. What is it with these block kicks? Because I can never remember block kicks, and now all of a sudden they're happening every day at the end of the game. But a note on this one, the Bears filed a complaint to the league offices saying that the Packers interfered with their long snapper and they ran him over, and it should have been a flag. Obviously, it didn't affect the kick. It would have been an after the play penalty. But I mean, there's no chance that they win. The league's not going to do anything. Maybe the most they can say is they missed the call and they'll work on it and try and tighten it up. But Chicago loses and they drop another one. Let's go to a team who can...
Wait, real quick, before we go to the next game, I did just want to mention one thing. And you mentioned how Caleb Williams, the Bears might be somewhat regretting picking him over Drake May and Jaden. The thing with me about Caleb is I don't care if a rookie quarterback is struggling in their rookie season. They're a rookie. That's what's expected. But the fact that Drake May is playing with Jalen Polk and Pop Douglas.
That's our friend.
Shout out to Pop Douglas, not meant in a mean way. But no, he's playing really well with them. Or at least solid, better than Caleb.
You're right. We'll bring up their game in a few.
He has Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, a really
Mhm.
good receiving back
Absolutely.
in DeAndre Swift, and the 9th overall pick in the draft with Rome Odunze, and he's
Mhm.
still struggling. You could make the same case. You could argue Daniels has better weapons as well, but I'd say that he's really
No,
brought the best
it's
out
Caleb.
of his weapons. Go into the season. Oh, he has Noah Brown, Diame Brown,
Mhm.
Olamide Zaccheaus, obviously Terry too, but like that's not necessarily the best wide receiver core.
You're
So
right.
it's just with who Caleb's playing with and the fact that he's still not able to do anything is definitely a big concern. But now we can move over to the next game.
All right,
And
well, Matt, we were hyping up a blowout, and this game went exactly how it should. When Jared Goff and the Lions, 8-1 coming into the game, now 9-1 offense, faces off against Mac Jones's 2-8 Jacksonville Jaguars offense, 52-6. If you didn't see this game, the only thing you missed was a whole lot of Lions touchdown celebrations. Jared Goff threw 4 of them. David Montgomery ran for 2 of them. This game, I mean, start to finish, absolute blowout. Actually, not start to finish because Jacksonville got the first points of the game. Detroit with a 21.3 touchdown second quarter. Absolutely crazy. They scored uh, five. No, sorry, excuse me. They scored 7 touchdowns and a field goal. Excuse me. Jacksonville, nothing went right. You couldn't run the ball. You couldn't pass the ball. The defense was terrible. Detroit gained 645 yards, 449 passing yards, 169 rushing yards. They were 8.5 yards per play. That's almost a first down a play, Matt. That is crazy. I mean, it's crazy. They dominated time possession and plays. They didn't punt in the game at all. They didn't turn the ball over. Every single drive was a score. I mean, who's going to stop the Lions offense? I mean, we were talking about it the last couple weeks that the Chiefs are a fraudulent winless team, and this week they get handed their first loss. I think the Lions are right now the best bet to win the Super Bowl.
I was going to touch on this when we got to the Chiefs game, but I'll mention it now. We couldn't say that the Chiefs were not the best team in the NFL until they lost. Until they lost, you had to consider them the best team in the NFL
So many
because
close wins.
that's just factually what was correct. But now that they lost, we can all agree that the Lions are better.
And the Bills and the
Mhm.
Steelers.
I think Bills
Maybe Steelers. We'll get into Steelers in a bit.
Bills probably I wouldn't go as far as to say Steelers yet.
They're on the bubble for me.
I'd
They're on
actually
the
feel
bubble.
more confident saying Ravens at this point. But I mean either way, we
Depends
can't
in like head-to-head matchup, like regular season
but
or
we
like
can't I don't think we can consider them the best team anymore after they take that loss.
absolutely.
But Goff, masterclass, 24 of 29, over 400 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. Montgomery and Gibbs combined for 144 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Amon-Ra, what a game. 11 receptions, 161 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. That's his that's his 8th straight game with a receiving touchdown. Jameson Williams also over 100 receiving yards and a touchdown. As you mentioned, Detroit had over 300 more passing yards than Jacksonville, over 100 more rushing yards than Jacksonville as well. Lions had 18 more first downs, and the Lions are on an 8-game winning streak and are now 9-1. It's the first time they've been on an 8-game winning streak. The first time winning 8 straight games since 1934. So nearly 90 years ago, nearly a decade. Jacksonville has lost 4 of their last games, and they're 14 of 17 in their last 17. Or they've lost 14 of their last 17 games, which is crazy. That's obviously going back to last season. And Coach Doug Peterson, he's on the hot seat to say the least.
Big time.
Yeah, I mean, we could see him gone this week, next week if they take another loss. Jacksonville, this game they got 6 points. Last game against Minnesota, they got 7 points. So it's been a real ugly performance for Jacksonville. Moving over to the next game, though, Rams versus Patriots in New England. Rams 28, Patriots 22. I'll let you start it off here.
Yeah, well, this is another 4-touchdown performance. Matthew Stafford, good 300 yards on the day. He hit Cooper Kupp twice and Puka Nakua once, 106 and 123 yards for those guys respectively. Those were really the only big two. Nobody else got more than 21 yards. Nobody else got more than 2 receptions. It's clear that those were his 2 favorite guys. And when you have a wide receiving group that good, why use anybody else? On the other side of things, Drake May, 30 of 40, so not terrible. 282 yards, 2 touchdowns, but also the interception. He hit Kendrick Bourne on one of those touchdowns and then also hit Vierden Lowe, 4-yard touchdown. Never heard of him before, but maybe start looking out. Ramondre Stevenson, I'd say a pretty classic Ramondre Stevenson game. He was a workhorse. He got a lot of carries, picked up 73 yards and 3.6 average per carry. Isn't the best, but that's what Ramondre Stevenson can do. He can grind and pound you, until the defense gets tired. And props to New England for sticking in this game. 28-22 is your final. So this game was close the entire time. New England battled back in that fourth quarter. They scored 9, obviously. The blocked extra point for Los Angeles, but that did not become a factor late in the game. Both teams committed 7 penalties, which is a bit higher than you usually see. But New England, I thought they did a good job. 6 of 14 on third downs is something that you really like to see from a rookie quarterback, meaning he's leading the offense pretty well. 2 turnovers for New England, but they had almost 40 minutes time of possession, which was shocking. I guess Los Angeles' drives were pretty quick. What did you see in this one, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, the Rams have won 4 of their last 5. This was a very solid game from them. Stafford had really similar game actually to Jared Goff, which is funny because they're kind of like the identical player, obviously got traded for each other. But their main 2 wide receivers had a massive game. Drake May looked solid. However, that one interception that you mentioned was a game-sealing interception.
Right.
Cameron Kitchens, who was the same player who got that 107-yard interception return for a touchdown, I think a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's gotten some big interceptions recently. But as I was saying with that, 4 out of their last 5 games have been a win for Los Angeles. They have, and I mentioned this before, but they are a big threat with both their wide receivers back. Matthew Stafford has looked incredible with both Kupp and Nakua. And this is a very tight neck-and-neck division, right? The worst team in that division is 5-5, and the best team in that division is 6-4. So the Rams have just as good of a shot to win that division as anyone else, in my opinion. And with all their guys healthy, I think that's more than a solid possibility. So I'm just saying they had a rough start to the season, I guess you could call it. But this is a team to look out for with how good they have been, at least recently. And then if you're ready to move over to the next game, maybe the game of the week. I think probably we could call it the game of the week. Ravens versus Steelers. Steelers 18-16 victory. Pittsburgh has won 7 of their last 8 games against the Ravens. I was making a really big deal about how the Steelers are the best team, I guess, against their own division. And they just proved that again today. They have been amazing against every AFC North team for the past few years. Pittsburgh is 2-0 also this year in games where they didn't score a touchdown. Obviously, Chris Boswell got, I think it was 8 field goals. 6 field goals. Which is just crazy. He was their entire scoring source.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, they're 2-0 in games without scoring a touchdown this year. The rest of the NFL is 2-18. So, yeah.
I guess classic Steelers football.
I guess if the Steelers, maybe they want to stop scoring touchdowns. I don't know. Clearly, it's working out somehow. But no, their defense has actually stepped up really big in games where they haven't scored a touchdown. Lamar Jackson did solid, but didn't put up the numbers we've seen from him earlier this season. Somewhat underwhelming game from Derrick Henry as well. 35 rushing yards, 1 touchdown, as well as a fumble, I think 3 plays into their first drive or something. Isaiah Likely, 75 receiving yards, led the offense. Justin Tucker, big problem in this game. Missed 2 field goals, has missed 6 field goals on the year. It's been a massive, massive, massive struggle for him this season. Obviously, he's one of the Ravens' most reliable guys. So to see him missing all these field goals, definitely somewhat of a concern, especially come playoff time when they're going to need him. Najee Harris, 93 scrimmage yards. George Pickens, 8 receptions, 89 receiving yards. Baltimore's offense was just in general really sloppy. They had a season low in both points and yards. They also had 12 penalties and 3 turnovers. But the Steelers getting a solid little bit ahead of them in terms of the AFC North standings. We'll see where it goes from here, though.
Yeah, I agree with you with all the main points you made. This is, excuse me, classic Steelers football. 6 field goals. Chris Boswell hit from 52, from 57, and then from 50, which ended up being the game-winning kick. The real head scratcher, Baltimore's 2-point attempt late in the game, the touchdown with minute and 6 left to play in the game. And their 2-point conversion attempt was Lamar Jackson rolling out to the left. Nobody on the Ravens blocked, and it was just like the easiest stop. And I'm wondering, like, that is your play call with Derrick Henry.
That kind of goes back to
Let's just run a read option up the middle. One of them is gonna get in.
I feel like that kind of goes back to the Seahawks Patriots Super Bowl. You have Marshawn Lynch run the ball. They don't. Ridiculous. They throw an interception. They lose.
Right. I mean, I get it. Lamar's, an athletic quarterback. That just doesn't make sense to me. And now you're sitting here as a Ravens fan, and you're scratching your head a little bit, right? I mean, obviously they lost literally by a toenail to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now to lose to the Steelers. And I'm not saying that it's been all bad for Baltimore. I mean, you got embarrassed by a really one of the worst teams in the league in the Raiders. But you dominated the Bills, right? And it's kind of confusing to be sitting here as a Ravens fan at 7-4 through 11 weeks and saying, well, we know we're a better team than, 7-4. It just seems a little bit confusing how they're not ahead of their division. I mean, all the credit. Who could have guessed that a team platooning Russell Wilson and Justin Fields at the quarterback spot would be 8-2 last year? I mean, this is so confusing, but Steelers somehow get it done. I talked about the home field advantage in Pittsburgh. It was evident they probably got themselves 2 points right there. And you're right, Justin Tucker's been a liability all year for Baltimore. I'm not going to go too in-depth into the stats. Lamar Jackson, a pretty average day for an MVP candidate, an interception and a touchdown, just barely over 200 yards. Derrick Henry, just not as utilized as you might think against a Steelers defense. The Steelers' goal of their side of things is to try and wear you out. I thought Baltimore would go with the same approach. Derrick Henry only got the ball 13 times. He found the end zone. I'm just confused why he didn't get the ball on the 2-point conversion attempt with a chance to win the game. Ravens fall to 7-4 and lose by 2. Is Pittsburgh going to run away with this division? Can the Ravens catch up?
It's nothing certain yet, honestly. Pittsburgh, they're up by, I guess, 2 games now, maybe 1.5.
Yeah, 1.5.
But I mean, I'm not sure.
Well, they're up 2 in the loss column because they have 2 losses. Ravens up 4.
Do the Steelers play the Ravens again this year?
Yes.
All right, so that's a massive game for Baltimore. Then it's really between them two in the division. Bengals have been really unlucky. We'll get to that later. Obviously, they took another loss this week, and then Browns. I mean, they're just whatever. They're the Browns. They're out of it. But I saw a video. It was from Shannon Sharp, and he was basically talking crap about how the Ravens handed the ball off to Henry 13 times in this game. And I know you mentioned that. They really should have utilized him more. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where they made their biggest mistake. But no, I think especially when the passing game wasn't necessarily working to perfection, it really would have been useful to use Derrick Henry. So what? He fumbled the ball. Go back to him. It doesn't matter. It's Derrick Henry. He's not going to fumble again. But I think that's where their biggest mistake was. I do think they'll be able to bounce back just fine. This is a team that could take a few bad losses. They lose against the Raiders, they lose against the Steelers, all that. But I'm never going to doubt their ability.
Yeah, agree.
And I mean, I'm never going to doubt their ability. They're an extremely trustworthy team. They can win some games. So we'll see that towards the end of the season, but definitely not too worried about them. Moving over to the next game, though. Actually, Josh, I'll go back to you. I know you want to say something real quick before we move over to that game.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that despite the Ravens dropping this game and the Steelers, leading their division by a bigger margin now, I feel like always with Steelers football, it's that they're going to win their division and probably be first or second round exits, right? Like this Steelers team, despite what their record reflects, is not like a surefire thing in the playoffs as much as an 8-2 team you'd think it would be. I mean, scoring only field goals, sure, you can get by with it here right now. And it's just unfortunate for the Ravens that Justin Tucker, you mentioned, is having the worst year of his career for the league's best kicker ever. And that's pretty much undebatable. But this is not, something that the Pittsburgh can sustain constantly if they want to make deep playoff runs. And despite looking very good right now, I think they might be an easy out in the playoffs. But now I'm good to move on.
Yeah, and moving on, those were all early window games, 1:00 games. Finally moving over to the late window, Seahawks versus 49ers in San Francisco. Seahawks 20-17. Geno Smith ran for a game-winning touchdown with 12 seconds remaining. Just wasn't enough for San Francisco to do anything on offense. Smith, besides the rushing touchdown, he played all right. Nothing spectacular. 25 of 32, 221 passing yards. Obviously, that rushing touchdown. And then 1 interception. Jackson Smith and Jigba, 10 receptions, 110 receiving yards. He has been incredible this year. There's some games where he hasn't done much, but then there's also games where it looks like he's a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. DK Metcalf, 7 receptions, 70 receiving yards. Brock Purdy did not play great in this one. 21 of 28, 159 passing yards, passing touchdown, rushing touchdown, and then 1 interception. McCaffrey, 106 scrimmage yards. He hasn't looked the same as old McCaffrey since he came back from that injury. He's had 2 solid games that you can't necessarily hate on. But I remember last season, it felt like he was guaranteed, number one, to get a touchdown every single week. And they basically ran through him in that offense.
Agreed.
He got like 75. He touched the ball like 75% of plays. They just ran through him, and it hasn't felt like he's been as involved this year, despite some solid stats at least. Juwan Jennings, 10 receptions, 91 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Some games it definitely feels like he's doing better than Debo with Ayuk out. He's played a massive role for the 49ers. 49ers currently last in the NFC West at 5-5 due to tiebreakers. But again, they're just 1 game behind the Cardinals at 6-4. So really anything can change, but they're definitely going to have to pick it up because losses like these are unacceptable.
You're right. It is really anybody's race in that division. And everyone is sitting within 1 game of each other. It's so tight. But on the Christian McCaffrey front, you got to remember this is only his 2nd game played coming off that major injury that kept him out the first 9 weeks. So I don't know how much you can go, oh, just give it to McCaffrey and it's so simple. But, coming off of that injury there, I think they're just trying to ease him into the lineup. And obviously, not give him too many carries, 20 or 19, excuse me. It's not exactly a small number, but certainly you mentioned last year, he was just that kind of reliable guy that you knew if the ball was in his hands, he'd make a play. But it seems like Shanahan isn't at that point yet. I mean, I'm not really sure what the exact specifications of where he's at right now. Is he on a snap count or something like that? But he's obviously not playing up to his full potential, as you mentioned. I mentioned that the running in the tailgate show that the running backs would be huge in this game, and that I actually predicted field goal game in overtime. Ended up being a field goal win in regulation for the Seahawks, but neither running back was good. Kenneth Walker, 14 carries, 54 yards. He found the end zone, but not exactly his greatest day. Zach Charbonnet, absolutely zero contribution, 4 carries for 3 yards. And then it looked awfully similar on the side of things for San Francisco. 16 carries, 79 yards. This NFC West division was looked at as one of the best in all of football heading into the year. And you just have a bunch of teams that are at 500 right now. It's a real head scratcher. Seattle effectively keeps their playoff hopes alive with this win. I mean, if you were to drop all the way down to 4-6, I mean, that's going to be a very hard hole to dig yourselves out of. We're talking about the Dolphins potentially being able to do it, but obviously, I just see a lot more potential with Miami than I have in Seattle. But beating the San Francisco 49ers on the road, a team with a lot of firepower, and this starts to scratch my head. Obviously, he went 21 of 20, 159 yards, never good. A touchdown and interception turned the ball over. San Francisco also, on a side note, 9 penalties, 54 yards. It starts to scratch your head about Brock Purdy, the last pick in the draft last year. Ended up looking great in his rookie season, and he led San Francisco all the way to the Super Bowl. But you got to think, without all his weapons like Ayuk and such, and he's sitting at 5-5. Is Brock Purdy all that good, or was last year a fluke because of the guys around him, man?
Brock Purdy, he's a system quarterback.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He plays well within this 49ers system, but when the system starts to have injuries, when they start to lose guys in the system, that's when he struggles. And I think people portray a bad image on system quarterbacks that they can't play in a non-system role. That might be true, but they do their job. And that's what teams need of them.
What do you expect from Mr. Irrelevant? I mean, people are out here now that the 49ers have dropped 5 games like, oh, Brock Purdy's such a fluke. I know last year wasn't real. Like, the guy didn't have these expectations.
Yeah, but I mean, he plays, again, well in that 49er system.
Right.
And that's all they can ask for him. You can't ask for someone who's going to go out there and scramble out of the pocket, get 500 passing yards, whatever. No, he's going to find his guys, and he's going to play well using those guys, but he can't necessarily do the most without them. Even Jalen Hurts, I had that perspective of him at least a few years ago. He's looked a little better this year, but I felt like he's a guy where he might have been a system quarterback. Again, I think he's kind of changed that narrative recently, but it felt like that, and he played his job really well. So all you can ask for in a system quarterback is for them to do well in the system. You can't ask for that much else. But another thing I want to touch on real quick, I know you mentioned that they're trying to ease back Christian McCaffrey, but my only concern about that is what would you expect if they were trying to ease back Christian McCaffrey? Probably a still decent amount of carries going to Jordan Mason, right? Well, last week against the Buccaneers, Mason got 5 rushing yards. This week he got 13 rushing yards. So I don't know if it's necessarily easing him back necessarily. And then also last week, McCaffrey got 3 yards per carry. This week he got 4.2, which is a little better, but still not great. So I just think it's been McCaffrey struggling. I don't necessarily think it's a matter of easing him back or not.
Yeah, I agree with you. Maybe it's just that the 49ers, they just want to pass the ball a little bit more. Now, if you watching this at home on your couch want to chime in on this, debate us on any other topics, just talk any amount of football with us. We would absolutely love to have you on. Give us a call. The Matt just posted the link in the chat. And even if you can't call in, maybe you have spotty Wi-Fi, you can just type something in. We'll put you up on screen and we'll talk about all your comments. So make sure to be one of those active listeners and get your calls in. But for now, we will be calling into ourselves. I mean, that doesn't really make sense. That was a bad transition. But Falcons, Broncos, we talked all year about Consistency Kirk. That's his new name on our show, Matt. This is Consistency Kirk. And today, yesterday, it was very majorly, terribly, horribly, worst game of the season inconsistently Kirk. 173 yards in an interception. Rookie Michael Penix got in there. 2 completions, 24 yards. I mean, the entire team, nothing went right. Bijan Robinson, who's been one of the most steady guys, 12 carries for 35 yards for Atlanta. That's a head scratcher. Bo Nix getting better every week. Bo Nix, you can't ask for more out of a rookie quarterback. I mean, I guess you can, but Bo Nix has highly exceeded expectations in his first year, especially Sean Payton. I mean, a guy that the Broncos were just excited to get rid of Russell Wilson in the offseason and move on to somewhere else. But they have found their guy in Bo Nix, 307 yards, 4 touchdowns. It is hard to argue with that. Javonte Williams also played very well, almost 60 yards and a touchdown for him. Cortland Sutton's been huge. Here's the thing about the Broncos. Who's like that good in their receiving core, and yet this is Bo Nix leading his guys to a 32-point win to a 6-5 record. Obviously, they've dropped a lot of big games. I mean, they haven't played a ton of good opponents. When they did play a good opponent, I'm talking about the Baltimore game. They got killed, but I mean, they played well against the Chiefs. Bo Nix has done a very good job. 400 total yards for the Denver offense. Almost 300 of those come through the air, and then they're really good again. I talked about this with with Drake May, 6 of 11 on third down. I think that's just a byproduct of how well your big players are willing to make plays on third downs, the biggest downs of the game. And that's also a byproduct of, can your quarterback command a system, not get too nervous when the lights are shining the brightest. So 6 of 11 is a very positive sign there. Atlanta, nothing went right. You rushed for 50 yards, 4.0 yards per play. Here's the thing about Atlanta. It's not only Kirk Cousins, it's starting to become the whole team, right? All this inconsistency stuff. They're 6-5, right, in a fairly easy division. Their only competition is the Buccaneers, let's be honest here. So they have a good chance to win their division.
The Buccaneers aren't competition really without Evans or Godwin either.
Right. So they're probably going to win their division. I mean, I can't lock that up considering they just got blown out. I think I'm not going to sit here and say the Buccaneers don't have a chance, because are they above 500? I mean,
no,
they're all right around there.
They entered the week 4-6 and they had a bye week. So
okay, they're at 4-6, right? So Atlanta's 2 games up there. But that's another team like the Steelers that I'm not confident at all in down the stretch or in the playoffs. So I mean, there's a lot of problems in Atlanta, Matt. I've talked for enough time. You can go ahead here.
You mentioned that perfectly. That this is a team that's going to make the playoffs most likely no matter what. But they've had some really, really bad games this season.
Right.
At first, it looked like they could hang with the Eagles. They actually beat the Eagles earlier this year. It looked like they could hang with the
Those
Chiefs.
were the bad Eagles, remember? That was the Nick Sirianni hot day Eagles.
But now they're losing to the Broncos. Now they're losing to the Saints. And it's like, what's going on? But Bo Nix, you covered this. A historic performance. 28 of 33, 307 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. Now you might be wondering why I said historic. Shout out to the NFL Associated Press for hooking me up with these stats. I saw it on their game recap of this matchup. But Nix set a career best of completing 85% of his passes, and he joined Hall of Famer Peyton Manning as the only rookie quarterback in NFL history to throw 200-plus yards with 2 or more touchdowns in 4 consecutive home games. He also joined Dak Prescott as well as the only other rookie to have 4 games with 70-plus or better, or 70% or better completion rate and multiple touchdowns with no interceptions. So he has had a historic rookie campaign, actually. Javonte Williams also got 87 scrimmage yards and a rushing touchdown. Nix incorporated 10 different receivers. 10 different receivers had a completion. All of his 4 touchdowns went to different receivers. Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, Nate Atkins, and probably the best name of them all, Lil Jordan Humphrey.
That's my favorite name in the NFL, for the record. I wanted to buy his jersey.
Hey, Kool-Aid McKinstry. Solid.
Yeah,
Storm
that's a nickname. His actual name is like Lil Jordan, I think.
Yeah, it's insane though. Shout out to his parents. Broncos had over 250 more yards than the Falcons. I have a question before we move over to the next game. Is Jayden Daniels still above Bo Nix in the Rookie of the Year race?
Ooh, right now, yeah, I'd have to give it to him just because of the way that Washington's been able to command themselves. They've really, I mean, the way they started out, just winning by kicking a bunch of field goals against the Giants, looking like, this was sort of one of those years where with a rookie quarterback, you're not disappointed. And I guess I might have to go back on a couple of the things. I think I was just being a little too harsh against Caleb Williams and the Bears. In a rookie quarterback's first year, especially, I mean, I guess it's less apparent for the Bears because they have so many weapons, but your goal is to develop the quarterback and not to, go blow out teams. I think Washington's done a great job. Daniels has been such a fast developing quarterback. I think Bo Nix has too, but Washington's strength of schedule has been more difficult, I think. I mean, you tell me, Matt. You've been watching all the games for the only of these two quarterbacks that I see is mainly on NFL Red Zone. You're watching 4 quarters every week of Jaden Daniels. I think this is a better question for you.
Yeah, I'd still go Jaden because
Mm,
I think the problem is Jaden obviously had a kind of iffy week against Philly, obviously this week,
right.
and then he also uh, didn't play amazing against the Steelers the week before that. But people are discarding what he did in the first 9 weeks of the season. People are forgetting about all the records he was breaking and all that stuff.
Agreed.
It's a lot of recency bias and the fact
Mhm.
that Bo Nix obviously has been playing really strong. And I think actually some of the bias is quite literally the fact that the Commanders played on Thursday Night Football instead of Sunday. Because if they played on Sunday
Interesting take.
and if Jaden Daniels had a good game on Sunday, then I genuinely think people would be having less of a conversation.
Think it's
'Cause
about what. Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish.
yeah, I was gonna say people are already forgetting about Jaden Daniels and what he's doing. They're all focused right now on Bo Nix. If they played together on the same day, I think that'd be a different story.
Yeah, but the thing is, when you're watching primetime football, and I know I'm kind of a guy that doesn't watch all of primetime football games. I
Yeah.
certainly tune into most of the first half of each game before going to bed. But the thing is, when you're watching primetime football, there's no switching between channels. There's no watching red zone and only the highlights.
Yeah.
There, you are watching every play, right? So if there's apparent mistakes that wouldn't go onto an NFL red zone highlight package and wouldn't go onto an NFL Today update, you're not going to see those. So I think you're right. That's why they call it prime time. Everybody in the country is watching. So that certainly makes a difference. Had Jaden Daniels had one of those historic games like he did earlier in the year on prime time, it'd be a lot different of a story. But I think this is a sort of argument that will obviously be continued out
Also,
throughout the season to see who
shout
won.
out to Brock Bowers. I know you're not number one, but you've been amazing.
Yeah, but if there's a far and away great quarterback, it's just really hard to not
Yeah,
give it
yeah.
there. And especially with the MVP, I mean, I don't mean to get too off track, but the MVP has just become a strictly quarterback's award. But let's focus back on track to these games. And let's go to Orchard Park for Bills Chiefs. This was certainly, I mean, this was what you were calling the game of the week heading in. The Chiefs get handed their first loss of the season. I feel like the NFL community outside, if you're a Chiefs fan, very sorry about this. Not sorry, really.
No, I'm not
Um,
sorry, actually.
the entire NFL world was kind of like, hey, they got their first loss because we knew this team did not deserve to be 9-0. We knew this was not the best football team, despite what their record reflected. But Buffalo does it. And I said this going in on the tailgate show that if this was a postseason game, I absolutely see the Chiefs winning it. But in Buffalo, regular season, I feel like the Chiefs always have home field advantage in the playoffs. They're always the 1 seed. But in Buffalo, regular season, I could not see Josh Allen having a monster game. Not as big of a game that I would have thought, but he certainly got it done, and his legs were a huge factor. 55 yards, a rushing touchdown. I mean, on that, I think, what was it, 4th down and 2? Bills decided not to kick a field goal. Allen lowers his shoulder, trucks some defenders, spins some moves. Josh Allen, absolutely huge. Not exactly the passing day you'd expect from an MVP candidate, but he played better than Lamar Jackson, which is really what the race is at this point. I mean, I think you agree. You can toss another name in there if you think maybe Jared Goff, but that 5 interception day last week certainly going to send him back. But Allen has really just been the most valuable player, especially after losing Diggs in the wide receiver room. Khalil Shakir made up for Diggs' absence, I guess, today, 70 receiving yards. Josh Allen, 262 yards through the air. He did have an interception, a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown goes along with it. This game had a lot of fireworks. Patrick Mahomes throws 3 touchdowns through the air, but also 2 interceptions, and one of those was a costly one at the end of the game. I mean, I didn't think the Chiefs were going to win it, but I'm never going to count them out after that 13 seconds game. Kansas City's capable of anything. Kareem Hunt, I mean, certainly better than previous weeks. Not the best, but you can see the improvement, I guess you could say.
I'd say
60.
Kareem Hunt was much worse than previous weeks, actually.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Mhm.
I was thinking of Nick Chubb. They both used to play on the Browns. Bad
Yeah.
association, but Kareem Hunt did not play well this week. Was my main point. Um, in the receiving department, Xavier Worthy got a touchdown, but Bills win by 9, 30-21, improved to 9-2. No one's going to catch them in the AFC East. I think these are really the two teams competing for the number one overall seed. I guess you could toss Pittsburgh in the mix there, but these are really the two teams. Matt, what do you see in this one?
Yeah, I mean, Mahomes did all right. Again, that interception at the end
Mhm.
was pretty costly, although you can't blame him because he had to rush down the field, right?
Yeah.
He had about 2 minutes. He had to score that touchdown, they had to recover an onside kick, they had to score another touchdown. So him not throwing any risky passes, you just can't expect that. He
Yeah.
obviously has to throw some
Mhm.
risky passes, whether they end up, being good or not. Noah Gray, 2 receiving touchdowns, Xavier Worthy, 60+ receiving yards and a touchdown as well. Josh Allen, masterclass of the game. And another name I want to put out there for potential MVP would be Joe Burrow. The problem is record for them. But I think Burrow, you could argue, has had a better season than Allen. And then also,
Yeah, I
and
just can't see it happening. Cincinnati's at 4-7.
then also, obviously, they don't do positional players really, but Saquon Barkley and Jamar Chase would also.
Not non-quarterbacks, that's offensive player of the year. MVP is who's the best quarterback and who had the best stats.
They should really
Offensive
make
player
it.
of the year is who's the best running back slash, wide receiver.
They
In
should
my
really make it
book,
like MVQ, most valuable quarterback, and then skill player of the year, skill position player of the year,
that's
and
just
then just
offensive rookie of the year.
yeah, it's yeah, but honestly, it's a whole system.
I mean, I
James
guess
Cook,
what that eliminates is like
mhm,
your center winning rookie of the, or excuse me, offensive player of the
James
year, but I don't think that's ever happened. At least, please enlighten me if it has.
James Cook, pun intended, he was cooking in this game. Actually,
Yep.
only got like 20 rushing yards, but he did get 2 rushing touchdowns, which obviously made a big impact down the stretch. Khalil
Hmm.
Shakir, another solid game, 70 receiving yards. Curtis Samuel, as you mentioned, got that touchdown. But as I mentioned earlier, Chiefs are no longer undefeated. We were waiting for that to happen. Now we can all agree that they're not the best team in the NFL. There's a solid amount of teams better than them. Bills, Lions. There's a few teams you could throw in there that aren't guarantees that we don't need to get into right now.
Hmm.
But Bills have won 6 in a row. They're extremely hot right now. So, overall, really convincing game for Buffalo. And I have a solid feeling that they'll be able to take care of business potentially in the playoffs if they do have to face the Chiefs.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, it's just too hard for me right now to say that Patrick Mahomes isn't going to win in the playoffs.
yeah,
It's just too
yeah.
hard.
But moving over to our final game, Bengals versus Chargers in Los Angeles SoFi Stadium. Chargers 34, Bengals 27. Make sure in case you were not actually watching the game, don't just look at the stats and think that this game was close.
Right.
Because the Chargers entered the half up 24-6. Yeah, they had an 18-point lead entering the half. Bengals made a massive comeback before eventually losing by a single touchdown. As I mentioned, though, Joe Burrow, 28 of 50, 356 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Throwing 50 passes in a game is insane. I know just a few weeks ago he threw 56 passes in a game. So Bengals really pass heavy team. Chase Brown got 22 carries, 5 receptions, 143 scrimmage yards. Amazing game from the Bengals wide receiver duo. T. Higgins, 9 receptions, 148 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Jamar Chase, 7 receptions, 75 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. Justin Herbert, also a pretty solid game. Not a great completion percentage, just barely under 50%. But he also got just under 300 passing yards, 65 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns. J.K. Dobbins, 2 rushing touchdown game. Lab McConkey, just under 125 receiving yards. Will Dissly, even tight end for the Chargers, 80 receiving yards and a touchdown. But I looked at this. I looked at the schedule right before we actually started recording. The Bengals have Six of the Bengals' 7 losses have come within one possession. They have just not gotten the benefit of the doubt. I understand having maybe like 4 losses in one possession games, but 6 out of 7 is really crazy for them. And a lot of them I know have been 1 point, 3 points. So yeah, it's been really
Right.
tough luck
And
for them.
both of those, I mean, 2 of those were great games for the ages against Baltimore.
Yeah. Mhm.
All right. Well, what I saw out of this game, first of all, my memory must have been lagging when I said Saquon for offensive player of the year. It's Jamar Chase. I mean, this guy just continues to be ridiculous. Adds another 2 touchdowns to his total on the stat sheet. 75 yards, not his greatest day in the yards category, but they get it done. And when you look at the scoring summary, I mean, you absolutely summed it up beautifully. This offense for the Bengals was full of frustration in the first half. You get 2 Evan McPherson chip shot field goals. They could not score at all. For the Chargers, they could not stop scoring at all. 24 first half points compared to 6. And then the script just got flipped. I mean, it was like however many you score in the first half, I'll match that. And however many we score, you match that. I mean, it was pretty crazy. It all came down to the last play of the game. The Chargers are at their 29-yard line, and they run the ball to J.K. Dobbins, presumably to try and get into better field goal range with 18 seconds left. And he just turns it upfield and heads for the end zone and gets the game-winning touchdown with 18 seconds to go. And that is why Los Angeles wins. I mean, who knows? Obviously, it's an indoor stadium, but we've seen multiple blocked kicks these last weeks. So if he doesn't get into the end zone, maybe they don't win. So great job by J.K. Dobbins, determined to run. Joe Burrow continues to play beautifully, but 50 pass attempts I feel like is a lot. They snap the ball a lot of times because Chase Brown also had 22 carries in the rushing department. So I checked team snaps here, 78 total plays. Wow, that is a lot for Cincinnati, but they also took 8 penalties, 56 yards. But Joe Burrow, 363 yards, 0 interceptions. The only turnover of this game was a Los Angeles fumble. T. Higgins, another huge game. And when I look at it from Los Angeles' side, and the job that Jim Harbaugh has done has been absolutely impeccable. You lose your 2 top receivers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams heading into the season. You're running off Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnson, and I guess in this game, Will Dissly. And you pick up J.K. Dobbins for dirt cheap, and he's going to score 2 touchdowns and the game winner. Justin Herbert has made huge strides of progression this year compared to last year. Los Angeles has done a great job turning things around there. Actually, this is very weird to say. The Chiefs fall to 9-1. There's an outside chance, and by outside chance, I mean 10% chance that Los Angeles could swoop in here and steal the division. I mean, I'm not sure what the Chiefs' schedule is coming up. I know they have the Panthers next week, which is like an automatic win. I'm going to look at it right now. Okay, never mind. I do not think that the Chiefs will blow this. They have Panthers, Raiders, and then the Chargers, so a big chance for the Chargers to actually make up some ground there. But then they finished Browns, which is win. Then they finished Texans, Steelers in the last 2 weeks of the season. So that's 3 games, Chargers, Texans, Steelers, that I think that the Chiefs could lose. The Chargers have an outside chance at possibly swooping in for this division, which is crazy to say because Chiefs got their first loss this week.
Chargers would have to basically win out because they're already 3 games behind, and then the Chiefs, I think you said, had about maybe 3 tough games left on their
3
schedule.
challenging games.
So they'd have to win out and then beat the Chiefs in that one matchup. Maybe a 5% chance, but
not much.
Overall, also, real quick, Joe Burrow, 50 passing attempts this game, 56, as I mentioned last game against the Ravens. And then the week before that, he had 39, and the week before that, he had 37. Last 4 games, 35-plus passing attempts in all of them. 2 of the games, he had 50-plus. So if there's one guy you can bet on throwing the ball a lot, it is Joe Burrow.
Right, and I think that the Bengals are finally coming around. That Joe Burrow is their guy, and that Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and you mentioned all the one-score games that they've lost. Their record has really been a byproduct of unfortunate events happening down the stretch of games. I mean, you think they at least going to win one of those against the Ravens, but they don't. And then Joe Burrow has just been amazing. I think all around they have a good football team. They lose a heartbreaker on Monday night. I mean, they showed the grit and grind coming back from only scoring 6 in the first half. They score 21 in the second half. So really a good job there of coming back. But then Los Angeles just gets the better of them. And they have just been the better team. They've been able to finish down the stretch. And Los Angeles deserves this win.
Yeah, and I mean the Bengals have played some tough competition, at least in their losses. Chargers was obviously one of them. 2 losses against the Ravens, 1 against the Eagles, and then the Commanders, Chiefs both got one as well. So I mean, I guess you can understand some of their losses. But if you have nothing else left to say, then I guess we'll start wrapping this thing up. With that being said, can't thank you enough for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
All I gotta say is that with Nico Collins coming back for Monday Night Football between the Cowboys and the Texans, I would not be surprised if these guys go out there and drop 30 plus points. Texans by 35. This game's not going to be close.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. We've seen games last year where Cowboys look whatever, and
The
then
Texans have been dropping games recently. I mean,
yeah, but I
they,
mean, still, 49ers beat the Cowboys by like 30 last year. I feel like there's always that one game that just reminds you how atrocious the Cowboys are. They've already had multiple of those games this season,
uh,
but I mean, what are they? 3-6.
I
They're
think they
bound to have.
tossed up like 6 points last week. I mean,
They're
Texans have
they're bound.
taken back-to-back losses and they barely escaped with a win against the Colts. So maybe some bad luck there, but yeah, no chance they lose to the Cowboys, even though it's in Arlington.
Yeah, for everyone who made it up to this point, I doubt you did because it was an hour and 6 minutes long, our longest recap episode yet. But if you did,
Mhm.
can't thank you enough for watching. Again, I'm Matthew Heiserman alongside Josh Wolver for your Week 11 Highlight Haven NFL recap show. And as always, we will see you next time.
See ya.